My Thomas Story Library, Hiro. This is a story about an old engine called Hiro, who was lost for many years. Thomas and Percy wanted to help Hiro get back on the rails again, but would they be able to save him from being sent for scrap? One summer, Spencer was visiting the island of Sodor. He was helping build a summer house for the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. "Out of my way, slowcoach! I've no time to chat," he would say. He boasted that he was the fastest and the strongest engine on Sodor. One day, Spencer challenged Thomas to a contest to see who was strongest. "Whoever pulls his heavy load the furthest wins," he sneered. Thomas and Spencer met at the shunting yards. Edward whistled, "Peep, peep," and they were off. Spencer steamed ahead, but little Thomas was soon in trouble. At the top of a steep hill, he felt that something was wrong. "My brakes have broken! I'm going too fast!" Thomas gasped. He whooshed down the other side of the hill onto an old rickety track. He crashed through some bushes and came to a stop. Just then, a voice called, "Hello?" Thomas was surprised to see an old engine. He looked rusty and broken. My name is Hiro," said the engine. "What are you doing here?" Thomas asked. Hiro told Thomas how he had come to Sodor from far away. "I was the strongest engine there," said Hiro proudly. "They called me the master of the railway." Thomas promised to fix Hiro and make him as good as new. Thomas was so excited that he forgot all about Spencer. He puffed slowly to the Sodor steamworks to get his brakes fixed. His friend Victor was there. Thomas saw a wagon with an old boiler. "What's going to happen to that, Victor?" asked Thomas. "That rubbish is just scrap," said Victor. Thomas offered to take it away. This boiler could be mended and given to Hiro, thought Thomas. That night in the sheds, Thomas told Percy all about his new friend Hiro. Thomas made Percy promise not to tell anyone. If the Fat Controller finds out, he might send Hiro for scrap, Thomas worried. So Thomas and Percy made a plan. The next morning, Percy hid his mail trucks and worked on Thomas's branch line so that Thomas and his crew could start fixing Hiro. Nosy Spencer wondered what they were up to. On his way back home that evening, Thomas saw Percy looking sad. "I burst a valve pulling the load on your branch line," Percy moaned. Thomas felt sorry for his friend and shunted Percy to the steamworks. Just then, the Fat Controller arrived. He was very cross. "Thomas, why was Percy pulling your carriages instead of delivering the mail?" he boomed. "And where are his mail trucks?" Thomas felt terrible. He promised to help Percy with the mail train the next morning. At Tidmouth Sheds, the engines wanted to know why Thomas was in trouble with the Fat Controller. Thomas huffed a huge puff. He needed his friends' help. So he told them all about Hiro. When Hiro broke down, his crew couldn't find the parts to fix him. So he was put in a siding and everyone forgot about him, Thomas said. Gordon gasped and James jumped. All the engines wanted to help Hiro. The next few days were very busy on Sodor. Gordon, Edward and James took it in turns to carry parts to Hiro, and Thomas worked on his branch line. But little Percy had forgotten where he had hidden his mail trucks. Thomas and Percy decided to visit Hiro and look for the missing trucks later. "Look at me!" cried Hiro as his firebox began to flare. Hiro was a colourful patchwork of parts, and he was feeling better already. Suddenly, there came a loud poop poop! It was Spencer! When he saw Hiro, he gasped. "So this is what you've been doing," he smirked. "Making a heap of scrap for the smelter's yard? Wait until I tell the Fat Controller." And with that, Spencer wheeled away. Thomas had to tell the Fat Controller about Hiro before Spencer did. He pumped his pistons and soon caught up with the big engine. Then the old track gave way under Big Spencer, and he got stuck wheel deep in mud. Thomas puffed on to Knapford Station, his wheels whirring. He told the Fat Controller everything. About Hiro, and how he didn't want him to be scrapped. And about Spencer, who was stuck in the mud. "Did you say Hiro?" asked the Fat Controller. "He was the master of the railway. Why would I scrap him? You should have told me before." The Fat Controller ordered Hiro to be taken to the steamworks straight away. A few days later, Hiro had a brand new boiler, a shiny funnel, and a proper coat of paint. He looked splendid. Spencer was still stuck in the mud. Percy and Thomas weren't strong enough to pull him out. But Hiro was. With a mighty heave, Hiro lifted Spencer onto the tracks and took him to the steamworks. "Thank you, Hiro," said Spencer in a sorry voice. One morning, all the engines gathered at the docks to say goodbye to Hiro. "It's time for you to go home, Hiro," said Thomas. "I will never forget how you saved me. Do come and visit me one day," chuffed Hiro. The engines whistled as Hiro puffed onto the ship. The rest of the summer on Sodor went more smoothly. Percy found his mail trucks, and Thomas helped Spencer finish the summer house for the Duke and Duchess. And they never forgot about Hiro, the master of the railway. My Thomas Story Library, Kevin. This is a story about Kevin, a little crane who helps Victor mend engines at the Sodor Steamworks. Clumsy Kevin had a lot to learn, but when Spencer ran into trouble, could Kevin come to his rescue? Early one morning, all was quiet at the Sodor Steamworks. Victor the little tank engine and Kevin the small yellow crane were fast asleep. Then suddenly, poop, poop, poop! The noise of an engine whistling loudly woke them up. "Trembling tracks!" said Kevin as a train rushed by. "What's that noise?" "That's Spencer's whistle," replied Victor. "I'd know that snooty sound anywhere." Spencer was visiting from the mainland. He wanted everyone to know he had arrived on Sodor. Victor and Kevin got ready to start the day's jobs. They liked helping broken down engines get back on their wheels again. "Let's get to work, Kevin," said Victor busily. "Yes, boss," yawned Kevin. He wheeled sleepily to a corner of the works. But he wasn't watching what he was doing and dropped some engine parts. They landed with a clang! Victor shut his eyes. "Kevin! Slowly, slowly!" "Sorry, boss," said Kevin. "It was a slip of the hook." Meanwhile, Spencer had steamed to Tidmouth Sheds. The engines were still dozing inside. "Poop, poop!" whistled Spencer. "Wake up, lazybones! Why don't you get to work like me?" he went on rudely. "Poop, poop yourself!" grumbled Gordon crossly. He was tired from pulling the big express. "You could do with a washdown," teased Spencer. "Look how shiny my silver paint is." This made Gordon even crosser. You're too big for your buffers, Thomas puffed. Thomas's crew lit his fire, and Thomas built up steam. He shunted slowly out of the sheds. His first stop would be the steamworks, so that Victor could mend a crack in his funnel. Spencer steamed after him. "Let's have a race to see who's faster," he said. "No thank you, Spencer," said Thomas. He knew he had to get his funnel fixed so that he could be a really useful engine again. "Scaredy engine," Spencer sneered. At the works, Kevin was still making mistakes. "Those hooks can be sleepy," said Victor kindly. "Keep going, Kevin." Just then, Thomas puffed in with Spencer. Kevin was so excited to see them that he wheeled straight into a heap of scrap iron. Clang! Crash! "Hello, Spencer," smiled Kevin. "Do you need a helping hook?" "No, I don't. Big engines like me never break down," Spencer sneered. Kevin wanted to show how strong he was, but he hooked too much at once. The load was so heavy, it slipped from Kevin's hook and landed right in front of Spencer. Clang! Crash! Bang! "You clumsy crane! Stop that then!" shouted Spencer as loudly as he could. "Haven't you got a job to do, Spencer?" said Victor when the noise had stopped. "You're taking up a lot of track." Spencer was shocked. He slid out of the works without saying a word. "No one speaks to me like that," he thought to himself. As Spencer puffed away, there was Gordon, pulling the express. "Poop poop! Hello, Spencer!" whistled Gordon. "How do you like my express train?" But when Spencer tried to call back, no sound would come out of his whistle. Spencer had lost his voice. He slid away as fast as his wheels would carry him. "He's dreadfully rude," Gordon grumbled to his driver. Spencer steamed to Great Waterton to collect the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. When he reached the station, the Fat Controller and Lady Hat were waiting there too. "Hello, Spencer," the Fat Controller boomed. But Spencer said nothing. The Duke and Duchess got into Spencer's coach, and Spencer steamed away again. That night, when Spencer puffed into the sheds, Gordon was telling the engines how rude Spencer had been that day. "He needs to learn some manners," said James. But Spencer still said nothing. Thomas was surprised. He thought that Spencer would be sorry for being rude. Spencer went to sleep, feeling very worried. The next morning, Spencer was still worried. His funnel felt funny, and he still couldn't speak. He knew that he couldn't go to the steamworks to be mended because he had been unkind to Kevin. He set off to collect the Duke and Duchess. He had to take them to the docks in time for their ferry. He took the track that ran behind the steamworks. Spencer was going along nicely until suddenly he stopped with a splutter. Now Spencer had run out of water too. When Spencer tried to whistle, all that came out was a funny muffled sound. Luckily for Spencer, Kevin heard the funny whistle. He wheeled behind the works to see what was making the noise. He was surprised to see Spencer broken down. "Don't worry, Spencer," said Kevin kindly. "We can fix you." Spencer had never been more pleased to see Kevin. He smiled at the little crane. Kevin gave Spencer a nice long drink of water while Victor mended Spencer's whistle. Then Kevin finished his jobs carefully. He tidied trucks and moved metal without a single clang. Soon Spencer felt much better. "Thank you," he said to Kevin and Victor. "I'm sorry I was rude." He collected the Duke and Duchess and arrived at the docks just in time for the ferry. Kevin and Spencer are now great friends. Spencer always visits Kevin whenever he comes to Sodor. and he never shouts. My Thomas Story Library, Victor. This is a story about Victor, a shiny red engine who runs the Sodor Steamworks. But when Thomas had to take over, it took Victor to show him that really useful engines listen to each other. One morning, the Fat Controller had a special new job for Thomas. You must look after the steamworks while Victor is at the transfer yards, he said cheerfully. Thomas's firebox fizzed with excitement. He loved visiting the steamworks. Make sure you listen to Victor carefully. He will tell you everything you need to know, the Fat Controller told Thomas. Yes, sir, Thomas whistled happily as he set off. When Thomas arrived at the steamworks, Victor was waiting for him. Everyone liked Victor because he always knew what to do and kept the steamworks running smoothly. Hello, my friend, he smiled. Today is going to be a busy day for you. I like being busy, Victor, tooted Thomas. He couldn't wait to get started. Now, Thomas, said Victor firmly, when an engine comes in, you must listen carefully to their problem. If you get stuck, ask Kevin. A cheerful yellow crane wheeled towards Thomas and Victor. That's right, Thomas, said Kevin. Just ask me if you get in a fix. But Thomas was too excited to listen. He just wanted to get on with his very important job. Don't worry, Victor. I know what to do, he chuffed. You'd better get going or you'll be late. Victor puffed off towards the transfer yards. Thomas was now in charge. Before long, Spencer steamed into the steamworks. His shiny paint was scratched. Where's Victor? Spencer asked. He's away today. I'm in charge, Thomas replied. I'll check you from whistle to wheels. Kevin was worried. Thomas, Spencer only needs a new coat of paint, he said. But Thomas wasn't listening to Kevin. After all, he was in charge. Put Spencer up on the hoist, Kevin, he said bossily, before puffing away. A few moments later, Henry arrived at the steamworks. He was spluttering and stuttering, wheezing and sneezing. He was surprised to see Thomas instead of Victor. Victor is away today. I'm in charge, said Thomas. I know what's wrong. You've been given the wrong coal, Henry. Oh no, Thomas! I have my special coal. The problem is... Henry wheezed. But Thomas wasn't listening. After all, he was in charge. He asked Kevin to fetch Henry's coal. Next, James puffed into the steamworks. His funnel was blocked with straw and twigs. Where's Victor? He puffed slowly. He's away today. I'm in charge, said Thomas. What you need is a new funnel, James. Oh no, Thomas, James began. But Thomas wasn't listening. He was in charge. Kevin, find a spare funnel, please, he tooted. Thomas looked around the busy steamworks and was very proud indeed. Poor Kevin wheeled this way and that with worry. He wanted to help, but Thomas had given the little crane too many jobs to do. Then there was trouble. As Kevin reversed with Henry's coal, he bumped the control panel and sent Spencer shuddering into the air. Haven hooks! Kevin cried. He dropped the coal in surprise, and black dust flew everywhere. The engines couldn't see a thing. Henry biffed into James, and James blew the biggest puff of steam he had ever blown. Soon the gleaming steamworks was covered in soot, twigs and straw. Thomas heard a voice through the dark clouds of dust. Sizzling sodor! What has happened to my beautiful steamworks? Said the voice. It was Victor. He had arrived back early from the transfer yards. Thomas looked at Victor, then at the mess and muddle around them. I'm sorry, Victor. This is all my fault, Thomas said. I didn't listen to Kevin, and I didn't listen to my friends. I was too excited. Now look at the mess I've made, he puffed sadly. Thomas was very sorry. I think, my friend, you are right, Victor huffed. But if you listen carefully to us now, we can clean the steamworks together. This time, Thomas did just as his friends told him. First, they took Spencer down from the hoist. I don't need checking from whistle to wheels, Thomas. I just need some new paint for my scratches and scuffs, he said. Yes, Spencer, smiled Thomas. Soon, with a little help from Victor, Spencer's silver paint was sparkling again. Next, Victor and Thomas talked to Henry. I have my special coal, he told them, but my firebox is making me wheeze and sneeze. Now that he knew what the real problem was, Thomas knew just what to do. Don't worry, Henry, Thomas whistled. Your firebox needs a clean, that's all. Thomas was right. After Victor and Thomas had helped clean Henry's firebox, Henry felt as good as new. Last of all, Thomas and Victor went to help James. I don't need a new funnel, James said. I just need my old funnel cleaned and polished. And before long, James was shining from fender to footplate. Now all the engines were ready to be really useful and the steamworks was clean again. Thomas promised that next time he visited the steamworks, he would listen to what Victor told him. My Thomas Story Library, Troublesome Trucks. This is a story about the first time Thomas met the Troublesome Trucks. Most of the engines knew that the trucks liked to cause trouble on the railway lines, but one day Thomas found out for himself. Thomas the Tank Engine knows how to handle trucks, but the first time he had to pull them wasn't easy. Soon after he had started working on the Fat Controller's railway, Thomas became tired of pulling coaches. I want to try something different, he would puff noisily to the engines in the shed every night. The other engines didn't take much notice. They knew Thomas was young and had a lot to learn. One night, Edward was next to Thomas in the shed. Edward was a kind old engine and felt sorry for Thomas. I've got some trucks to pull tomorrow, he told Thomas. If you want, you can take them and I'll pull your coaches instead. Oh, thank you, Edward, peeped Thomas happily. And all the engines got a good night's sleep at last. The next morning, the drivers agreed to the switch. Thomas puffed off to find Edward's trucks. He didn't know that trucks were silly, noisy things. They loved to play tricks on engines that didn't know how troublesome they were. Edward knew all about the trucks. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was too excited to listen. Thomas waited impatiently while he was coupled up to the trucks. When the guard blew his whistle, Thomas quickly peeped in reply and began to puff away. But the trucks didn't want to go. Ow! Ow! They squeaked. Wait! Thomas wouldn't wait. Come on, he replied, giving them a hard little bump. Ouch! Cried the trucks, as Thomas pulled them onto the main line. Thomas was happy to Thomas was happy to be doing something different. Come along, he sang as he went. All right, the trucks grumbled. They clattered through stations and rumbled over bridges. The trucks didn't like being bumped and looked for a chance to cause trouble for Thomas. Thomas soon came to the top of Gordon's Hill. Steady now, warned his driver as he shut off steam and put on the brakes. We're stopping, called Thomas. No! Said the trucks naughtily. Go on! Then they all bumped forwards and pushed Thomas down the hill before his driver could stop them. Thomas raced down the steep hill much too quickly. The trucks rattled and laughed behind him. Stop pushing! Thomas panted, but the trucks would not stop. Huff, huff, ho! You're too slow! We'll give you a push to help you go! They sang rudely. Thomas could see the station at the bottom of the hill, but he was going too fast to stop. Cinders and ashes! He cried. He whooshed straight past the station platform. The people waiting there were quite surprised to see a little blue engine going so fast with a train of laughing trucks. At the points ahead, Thomas could see that the line split into two tracks. Thomas could see that the line split into two tracks. He had an idea. Luckily, the way was clear as he turned off the main line and into a goods yard. Oh dear, Thomas groaned as he skidded along the rails. His brakes squeaked and his axles tingled. At the far side of the yard were the buffers at the end of the track. Thomas was going to crash. I must stop, Thomas said, and his driver applied the brakes even harder. The buffers were getting closer and closer. Thomas closed his eyes tight shut. But there was no crash. Thomas opened one eye carefully. He had stopped just in front of the buffers. But next to the track was the Fat Controller, looking very cross. Why did you come in so fast, Thomas? The Fat Controller boomed. I didn't mean to, Thomas explained meekly. The trucks pushed me down the hill. You've got a lot to learn about trucks, little Thomas, the Fat Controller told him. You must find a way to make them behave. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Yes, sir, Thomas promised. The next day, Edward showed Thomas how to pull the trucks properly and keep them in line when they played their naughty tricks. Thomas even stopped bumping them, except when they misbehaved. And from then on, Thomas never complained about his coaches again. They were much easier to pull than those troublesome trucks. My Thomas Story Library, Charlie. This is a story about Charlie, a fun engine from the mainland. Thomas wanted to be as much fun as Charlie, but he learned that sometimes it's more important to be really useful. One morning, Thomas had some exciting news. His boiler was bubbling with pride as he stopped alongside his friend Percy at the washdown. Hello, Percy, Thomas whistled. The Fat Controller has given me a very special today. I'm going to collect Alicia Botti, the famous opera singer, from the docks and take her straight to the town hall for a concert. Percy smiled at Thomas's excited face. I have some news too, he peeped. Someone else is arriving at the docks today. Who? Thomas asked, puzzled. Charlie, the new engine, Percy laughed. He's the mainland controller's favourite. Everyone says he's the most fun engine ever, even more than you. Before Thomas could reply, Percy had shoved cheerfully away. Bumpers and buffers, thought Thomas. I didn't think any engine could be more fun than me. He puffed off to meet Alicia Botti at the docks, his wheels whirring with worry. I'm so pleased to be travelling with you, Thomas, she said as she boarded Annie. Thomas felt very proud until he saw a small engine painted a cheeky bright purple. That must be Charlie, Thomas whistled quietly. He's smaller than me, and he certainly doesn't look more fun than me, thought Thomas, frowning. The purple engine puffed off with a mischievous smile. Hello, I'm Charlie. Are you Thomas? When Thomas said yes, Charlie continued. I've heard a lot about you. The mainland engines say you're even more fun than me. Thomas was very surprised. Just then, the Fat Controller arrived. Thomas, Charlie has a busy first day on Sodor, he boomed. He's helping with the concert. He has to collect the ice cream from the dairy and the red carpet from Knapford Station. Will you look after him? Yes, sir, replied Thomas. Yippee! Whistled Charlie with a burst of steam. The Fat Controller chuckled as he left. Let's race to the dairy, Charlie chirped cheekily. I'm too busy for races today, Thomas replied. I heard you were a fun engine, Charlie tooted, but you're not fun at all. Thomas didn't like being told he wasn't fun. All right, he said. I'll race you to the dairy. Then I'll take Miss Botti to the town hall. I'm sure there is time, he decided. And with a flash of their fireboxes, the race was on. Thomas and Charlie roared through tunnels and thundered through junctions, laughing all the way. When they reached the dairy, Thomas had beaten Charlie by a single buffer. How exciting that was! Trilled Alicia Botti. She sang a lovely song that made everyone smile. If you were a really fun engine, you'd race me to Knapford next, panted Charlie, as his ice cream churns were loaded. Thomas wasn't sure. He was late, but he wanted Charlie to think that he was a fun engine. One more race, Charlie, he agreed. The two engines wheeled off again. Halfway to Knapford Station, Thomas saw Gordon huffing towards the town hall with the Fat Controller. Cinders and ashes! I'm very late, Thomas gasped. Miss Botti will miss her own concert. He whistled goodbye to Charlie, then sped away down the line. It was a very bumpy ride, and the couplings became looser with every rattle. As he bumped onto the bridge, his coupling hook went snap! But in his rush, Thomas didn't notice he had left Annie and Clarabelle behind. At the town hall, Thomas steamed to a stop. Here I am, sir. He whistled to the Fat Controller, who was waiting on the platform. The Fat Controller looked at Thomas sternly. Here you are, Thomas, he boomed. But where are Annie and Clarabelle? With Miss Botti? Thomas's driver looked behind and had a terrible shock. The two carriages were missing. Thomas had been having fun when he should have been being really useful. I'm sorry, sir. I'll go and find them straight away, Thomas said. Thomas puffed quickly back the way he had come. At a junction, he saw Charlie chugging up and told him the problem. Let's have a race to find your carriages, Charlie tooted. The winner will be the #1 fun engine. Thomas frowned. No, Charlie. I want to be a really useful engine more than I want to be a fun one." When the signal changed, Thomas crossed the junction and steamed away. Thomas was very worried as he puffed along. Suddenly, he heard someone singing. "That's Miss Botty's lovely voice," he thought happily. He puffed up to the bridge. Miss Botty was leaning out of Annie's doorway, singing to a crowd of people below. Thomas had never heard anything so beautiful. When she had finished her song, Thomas smiled and told her, "I'm sorry I left you behind, but we must go now." Everyone was waiting for them at the town hall station. Charlie smiled when he saw Thomas puff in with his carriages. But the fat controller looked cross. "You've made Miss Botty very late, Thomas," he said sternly. "Not at all, I said Topham," trolled Alicia Botty. I've had the ride of my life with so many people to sing to. Thomas is such fun." Thomas was delighted, and he whistled "Peep Peep" to his new fun friend Charlie.